All right, the Hangout is now live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I am Christiana Ellis.
And I am Mike Mateen.
Distracted by noises right during the introduction.
There were dogs scampering up and down the stairs, other than I think to be annoying.
Tonight, we're going to be talking about...
You hear him?
Yes. Episode 5 of Survivor, David versus Goliath. I don't know. Do you have any high-level thoughts you want to get to, or should we just go to the play-by-play? What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is really a play-by-play kind of one because it was...
There were no, big shocks.
No.
There were surprises that were just like, oh, my God. It was more just like, oh, okay.
No, it was more like, well, that was an interesting sort of subplot to it with the jacket.
Yeah. This weird little micro-narrative laid in with everything else.
Yeah, so...
But it was perfect layered storytelling in the way that it reflected the larger themes of the broader narrative.
I think it was perfect. I mean, it was great storytelling because it was exactly the reason, that they were frustrated with her is things like that.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, I read an interview with Natalie afterwards, and we'll maybe talk a little bit more about her, but I'll probably be peppering insights from that in and around here. Suffice it to say that she talks in the interview like she did on the show, which is, I suppose, depending on your point of view, is a defense of herself or just continued evidence that that's just how she is. That's what she acts like, that's what she talks like, and that's who she is. And that's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah. But she was very much of the opinion that throughout her time on the show, she was bullied by everyone there. And on the one hand, I don't ever want to just dismiss a claim like that out of hand entirely, but we really saw no evidence of that.
Correct.
So, I don't know. There's also some sort of a collision during one of those first challenges where she claims that Jeremy was trying to injure her on purpose, which seems dubious, especially since his statement. So she was trying to climb over a thing and he did something with her leg that caused her to fall over. She looked up at him and he said, "I was trying to help you," but she could tell from his facial expression that he meant for her to fall.
Right.
And I'm like, that seems unlikely. Why would he do that? But anyway, I will actually say, though, because this is something that happens pretty early on, that there was a moment in this episode that, with frank honesty, softened me on Natalie. And it was the moment where she was feeling a little bit of exhilaration from the oncoming weather, just sort of the awe of the power of nature and that sort of thing. A little bit of excitement about that. And not only was it something she wasn't complaining about, which is nice, but I kind of feel that way about big storms too. I'm always have there's an ambivalence with that because, big storms actually do real damage and people die or lose their houses or all that sort of thing. So it's I don't want to say these huge storms are good, but they are cool in a kind of a powerful way for me that just, and so when she was talking about that, it just clicked with me and I'm like, yeah, I feel that way too. And then that just kind of was cracked open the door a little bit to Natalie for me.
Yeah, that didn't really, register too much with me.
It wasn't a big moment in the episode. It was really just, I think, really the first time in the season where she was expressing something that just kind of really resonated with me and felt like I get that. I'm on the same page. But in any event, what we actually began the episode with was we have thunder and lightning as Carl is joining the tribe, as Alec, so the preview that suggested Kara was mad at Alec was just immediately disintegrates because it's like, at least in that particular moment, because he immediately is trying to tell Kara, oh, no, I'm totally still with you. I didn't, I didn't leave you out of the loop on purpose. It was just a spur of the moment decision. And, yeah, we're still tight and we can just use them now. And, I loved that Kara kind of follows that up in the confessional with like, well, so this is happening now.
Yeah, he like pivoted from his pivot.
Yeah. He's trying to tell her what he thinks she wants to hear, and she recognizes that that's what's happening. But I liked her attitude, like in that confessional in the morning, where she's basically doesn't really even seem angry. It's more just like, well, I have to scramble now. We don't have the numbers anymore, so I'm going to have to work at this harder than I would have, but that's the game. So I did like her response to that and not being just angry about it the way the preview last time made it seem like she was.
Yeah, I thought she handled that really well. I mean, she was frustrated with him. He sort of told her what she wanted to hear. I felt like he was oddly confident in his response. Like he felt like, yeah, I mean, I'm totally on board. Like, why would I wouldn't, go against her. Yeah. And it's like, what happened? Like, what an awkward position he would be in had they been the ones that had lost or
yeah.
Or were they? No, they weren't. Yeah, they were the ones that lost. No, they weren't. It's different.
Oh, well, I mean, Alec and Kara, like that was not the tribe that lost this time.
Right.
That's what you mean.
Sorry.
Yeah, they were on the Buku tribe with
right.
the orange buffs.
I just remember, I was looking at how he had the idol or whatever, and that's what I for some reason.
But yeah, so in any case, I mean, I think Alec's confidence comes from he's trying to have it both ways, right? He's thinking I'm playing both sides to keep my options open. But you're right that he just seemed very self-confident of his ability to do that.
Right. And I think some of that has to do where I give a lot of credit to Kara for allowing him to feel that way, but then going back and saying, no, I mean, I let him think like he got away with convincing me, but he certainly didn't. And I'm going to make other plans if this is what has to happen. Yeah. I
think his confidence may also just be coming from the fact that what else is Kara going to do? She's all by herself now. It's essentially if she antagonizes Alec, it's 4 against 1 with her as the one, so he's probably thinking to himself, rightly, she needs somebody, might as well be me. I'm going to be the one who's open to that. Whereas for everybody else, they're going to be, the enemy. And that's what he's probably thinking. But of course, he doesn't seem to anticipate that she would actually just try to throw him under the bus, which is more effective than I would have guessed. I mean, we can maybe go ahead and talk about that a little bit. There's not a whole lot to it, but just the fact that both Davy and Elizabeth are kind of really quick to come around to the side of like, yeah, Alex seems a little shifty. I mean, we were glad that he helped us out, but not sure I trust him.
Because of what Alec did, though, they're in the position of power where if they decided to just vote with Kara to get rid of Alec, they could.
Yeah. Now, of course, I think Elizabeth continues to impress me. She's pretty smart of just kind of recognizing it's like, what Kara's saying makes a lot of sense, but I can also see this as which of the two of them is more likely to go back to a Goliath alliance. Well, Alex, the one who went against it in the first place, so he's potentially a traitor, whereas Kara, that was her plan all along, and it's only now that she's had an ally voted out that there's even a question that she wouldn't do that. So Elizabeth still seems like she's not persuaded, but it seems clear nonetheless that Alec is not as solid with his new friends as he might have hoped either.
Right.
That jumped ahead a little bit to some stuff, but mostly we got at the beginning the intensifying weather, and it was kind of nicely scripted. That, you know, we had that moment of them talking about how nice the weather is, and isn't it great that we get a little bit of sun, and oh, those clouds don't look so good. Go away, clouds. Okay, they're not going away. Ooh, those are some big clouds. Yeah, look at all that. Okay, wow. Just the slow build of all of that I thought was pretty great.
Yeah.
Well put together by the producers. Not obviously the weather itself, but just the editing together of the footage in that whole sequence. And so this is the second time in Survivor history that they have had to evacuate everyone from the beach. And the last time was also at this same location, also at an off, the odd numbered season so Dalton Ross seemed to be critical of the producers, or not critical so much of their decision making in terms of the scheduling as much as just observing that they seem pretty locked in right now to using that geographical region and these timelines, which means that they are filming during typhoon season. So, might keep happening.
You risk having typhoons.
Yeah. But apparently, during the 2 days that everyone was off the beach, they were all kept in total lockdown. And we talked about this a little bit when there was the whole thing with Pat and, the boats, and they were just describing like what the boat rides are like. But apparently all kept separately in very sort of bare bones living conditions, like no comfort items. And Probst was actually commenting in this interview about how probably it is quite a bit less fun to be there than to be on the beach, because you're alone. There is essentially nothing to do for 2 days, and you can't even talk to anybody.
It's crazy.
That sucks. That
it
sounds
makes
awful.
sense though, because
solitary confinement.
Yeah. Because what you don't want them doing from a producer standpoint,
mm-hmm.
You don't want them together where they could be discussing and plotting strategy that they can't film.
Right. And they don't want to break the fourth wall of the show any more than absolutely necessary, so they don't want to show them in another location.
Right. That's what I meant by they can't. So if they discuss some strategy that's key to some part of the game, like you said, they don't want to break the fourth wall if they televise that or video it.
Mm-hmm.
But so that they have to keep them apart. It makes sense.
Yeah. But so apparently that is what happened during the 2 days of the typhoon. And it ultimately, at least in this Q&A, they suggested that it actually, in a way, kind of made the whole filming schedule line up a little bit more naturally, because they otherwise had one less person left on the island than they would have at this equivalent day. And so to have 2 days elapse where nothing's happening kind of resets them to where they would have been.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But so in any event, once they get back to the beach, it's very dramatic which shelter was built with tools and nails and lumber, and which was built with woven palm fronds and and twine.
Yes. It's also very evident that it was the right decision for them to have left.
Yeah. The Buku tribe, or let's see, which one was the Nabini tribe was with the purple buffs was the ones that didn't have all of that extra construction equipment, and it was completely destroyed. The roof would have collapsed in on anyone inside if they had still been there. So yeah, definitely the right call. It was interesting that Buku's shelter, like obviously their camp was a mess, but the shelter held up relatively well, it seemed like. I mean, they probably had some repairs to make, but the structure was still there.
Yep.
Actual construction tools. What do you know? So that brings us to the reward challenge. And we got a little bit moment of, brief reaction drama with everyone seeing that, what? A Goliath was voted out? What? And yeah, that's what happened. It's a reward challenge where the first place tribe gets chickens, the second tribe gets just eggs. And it was a fairly bare bones challenge, and it did make me wonder if there had been something that would have been any more elaborate, except that it was this was the quick and dirty fix after the typhoon.
The only thing that my only argument against it would be the fact that it had slingshots in it, which they clearly wanted to use at some point.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. Yeah. I just wondered because I know that it's theoretically possible that it could have damaged some of the sets. But in any event, I didn't really have. It was fairly close, but I think the only real note that I had from the challenge itself was when Elizabeth won and was cheering, and she's like, that's from squirrel hunting. With the slingshots. And I was like, yeah. I continue to find her folksy charm endearing.
Yes. I thought that was great. I mean, I'm sure what the show was hoping for was for her to say something like, Davids are obviously good with the slingshot or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think I missed your reference to that a moment ago when you were I was thinking, oh yeah, slingshots. I mean, they have shots and challenges. Sometimes it makes sense that they would have, that might be a thing. But I didn't make the connection until just now, even though I'm recognizing in hindsight, that's probably what you meant.
That's what I meant, was this scene designed with the theme. So that's why I didn't think that it was not the right set. And it's our first reward challenge. So you expect it to be toned down a little bit from the immunity.
Yeah.
Something that goes a little faster, especially, since they're going to it early in the game, they want it to be quick, like you said, kind of quick and dirty, let's get through it and let's get back to the good stuff.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we've talked about in the last several seasons of how they seem to be improving our ability as the audience to know all of the people there by spending more time with them as a result of not having so many reward challenges,
right?
Which eat a lot of screen time.
A very quick one,
Yeah.
Because the reward challenges are interesting when they get to the merge because there are stakes involved with them.
Decisions to be made.
Right, decisions to be made. There are some actual things that affect the outcome. Not these don't affect the outcome, but they're less important. I mean, yes, they had a better shelter, and does that maybe affect something down the line? Maybe, I don't know, but it's to spend 20 minutes of an hour show showing them compete in an entirely different competition just to get, fishing gear is the best use of their time. And they've really figured that out. And that's again why I thought this made sense, because it was fast, it was entertaining, it fit the theme, and then it was done and we could move on. It didn't take up a lot of time. So
yeah. So orange with the orange buffs is the Buku tribe, and they won thanks to Elizabeth's squirrel hunting experience. And Nabini, the tribe with the purple buffs, got second place. And that meant that Tiva and the green buffs, despite being the first to get to the slingshot, nonetheless finished last. And I mean, this is Dan is obviously a fine guy and a good Survivor player, but he's apparently not a very good slingshot thrower.
Oh.
So we had the tribe with the chickens. Davy's thrilled, wanting to cook one up right away, and talks about Kentucky boiled chicken. So because you're not talking, it's focusing on me, but I got to see it.
My dog is in a baby deer position. He's frustrated that I'm talking to you.
I'm not playing. Oh. Well, he would probably like some KBC if you offered it.
KBC.
Kentucky boiled chicken.
Oh.
That's what Davey was talking about, and cooking up one of the chickens. But they don't have any. They can't boil it or they can't fry it because.
Sorry, yeah, I connected back to it. I get it. Yeah.
But so this is where we had the bit we talked about a little bit already, where Kara feels like she has no choice but to throw Alec under the bus now that the Goliaths are outnumbered. She figures they seem tight. I might as well try to be on their side instead of Alec. Otherwise, it's going to be me. And so here's where we got to the discussion about the eggs. And I'll concede that I did not follow what the argument was in this first scene. Like when they explained it in the tribal council, I figured it out. And I think it comes down to the somewhat counterintuitive for many people, the idea that I think the assumption from a lot of people would be uncooked eggs are going to go bad faster than cooked eggs. But that's actually backwards.
Correct.
And so that's what Lyrsa was objecting to is like, if we cook them all, they're going to go bad faster. So we'll have to eat them all right away. Whereas I think that was the whole point from Natalie, is that she was thinking, if we cook them the last, why would you wait? And we're just going to have to cook them tomorrow if we don't cook them today.
Right.
And I think the problem might have just been a disconnect on that bit of trivia of like, which way do they actually last longer? And they each assumed they had the right side of that, and therefore the other half of the argument made no sense.
Right.
Like, why would you argue that? Because that's, yeah.
Yes, that was definitely true. But I think this was exemplary to like a lot of the problems that the tribe was having in general, because it's not. It was more that Natalie just like wasn't listening to her, as opposed to whether it was the right or like it wasn't, because it's not a dramatically like wrong decision. And Natalie did even point out like it's only a dozen eggs. That's 2 each. We're going to eat them before they go bad, no matter what. Like that, she did kind of have that, and she did make that statement, and she's right about that. Like, what?
Yeah.
How long are they going to keep the eggs? Like, there's only 6 of them. Like, there's 6 people and 12 eggs. Like, you could cook them all now, but they weren't having a real conversation, and that Lyrsa was getting frustrated with her. Natalie didn't seem to be listening. Just decided this was what they were going to do. And Lyrsa couldn't even get in and have a conversation with her, even with the backing that she, went to culinary school, graduating magna cum laude. That didn't even break through for Natalie to take a pause and say, like, let me listen and have a conversation. Because if they'd actually really discussed it, Natalie may have still won the argument and said, look, I understand what you're saying. That makes sense, but we're going to eat all of these eggs within 2 to 3 days. They will not go bad if we cook them all, and this saves us from having to cook them again. So from an efficiency standpoint, it's better to just do it now and then just eat them again tomorrow. But the fact that she wouldn't listen was the problem.
Right.
It was wrong.
Yeah. An additional bit of context from that interview that I mentioned, Natalie said that a part of her argument was her frustration with the others, that she was the only one who knew how to make the fire properly, according to Natalie, and that they kept coming to her like they would go to do it and not be very good at it, and then keep making her do it after all anyway. So like they would say they wanted to do it and then fail and then make her come help anyway. And that happened over and over, is what she was saying about it. And I can understand that being frustrating. And so part of her wanting to boil them all right away was the idea of, I don't want to have to deal with this again tomorrow.
Yes. And that's what I said, is like, it's not that like Natalie was like dramatically wrong in insisting that they do it this way. It was that she insisted on it and didn't listen and hear anybody else.
Right.
You know?
Now, the thing that I've been thinking about a little bit, especially since, you know, a few weeks back, you know, we got a little bit of pushback from in the chat, which just reminds me I don't have the chat open to see if someone theoretically might be commenting. Not so far, but just wanting to examine, not that I thought, you know, our frustration with Natalie was really based on that, you know, sort of bias, but to think about it, you know, to like self-assess, like what is it about her that is bugging, you know, frustrating, I guess, right? And so ultimately, it's hard to know in this sort of situation, because there's always the chance that the edit is only portraying one side of somebody, right? But where I think that possibility breaks down is the fact that everybody out there on the beach with her is agreeing that that's what she's like. So it's not like nobody says it, but the editing makes us think it's happening. Most of the way we see it is that we are hearing all of the other people going, I can't take this anymore.
Right.
And that would seem to suggest that, if nothing else, there are lots of other people who found her very difficult to live with. And, you know, I wondered about, you know, what she says later in the tribal council is that she's not used to being the center of drama. And I wonder if that's just because, and this is not even a criticism at all, but she has surrounded herself with people who get her in her personal life. You know what I mean? Like there's an established dynamic and they follow it and it works. But where she's running into trouble here is with people who are not already on board with that dynamic. And she's not adjusting in response.
Yes.
But yeah, I thought the eggs thing was just interesting, just because it did just remind me of when I learned not all that long ago about eggs, uncooked eggs actually lasting, like, you do not need to keep them in the refrigerator all the time. They do not go bad right away. You know, we think of dairy items as spoiling quickly, but that's only after they're cooked. Or, you know, eggs anyway. I mean, milk can go bad.
Yes.
But so anyway, this is not talking about eggs. So let's instead talk about cageniuses and brochachos.
Brochachos. Yeah, these names that they are giving themselves are amazing.
And Christian is apparently now has been officially initiated and dubbed Hoss of the brochachos.
Yes. Or was that again? Head of, or it stood for something, didn't it?
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember. I kind of didn't process it as an acronym, but you might be right.
I'm pretty sure that it stood for something.
You might be right. I think he did like say head of something, and so maybe that's what it was, but I just didn't connect the dots in my head when he was talking. But in any event, adorable Christian bonding with those big, strong, buff guys. It's just like, oh, it's great. And it's kind of a bummer for Gabby that she is not able to connect with the others in the same way. And Dan is kind of matter of fact about it. Is I mean, she's kind of not, like she's kind of being more of an outsider, and that kind of makes her a target. I mean, it's not like it's anything personal against her, but she's not connecting us with us the way Christian is.
Yeah, and I mean, Christian is aware of that, and he played like we talked about how well he played it.
Yeah.
Last week, we didn't really get much from it this because they didn't need it.
Yeah.
But
But in any event, Dan really continued to impress in this episode, other than with his slingshot prowess or lack thereof. But recognizing that, okay, if we think Gabby's going to be probably the next target, but I want to make sure she doesn't get an idol. I already have mine from the other camp, but there's probably one here. So if I find it, I know no one else has it, and then I have two. And so sure enough, he goes looking, and I was just really impressed. And his rationale was very straightforward. Is like the one that I found had this purple cord on it. So I'm looking for
the green cord.
Yeah. And so that makes perfect sense, and it helped him narrow his search well enough to find that clue. And I do like the clues. I do like when they hide idols at challenges or at the camp or something like that. Just it adds that tension and risk and drama as a parallel to the existing drama of the challenge. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and I also liked his, the thought process he went through, because it also, whether he meant it this way or not, it gave him some defense if he is discovered looking for an idol. Because if John and Christian find out, they're going to be like, dude, I thought we were the Brochachos. Like, why are you looking for idols? Be like, well, because I didn't want, Gabby is like so clearly on the outs. I want to make sure she didn't have it. And, so it gives him that like high plausibility,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And, of course, we got a little bit of a reminder, too, of, him just talking about, when he, before he lost all the weight and, got in great shape, and just think, imagining, what would 320-pound Dan think of this? He would be so proud, like that. And, just,
it was nice.
Yeah, this is not like a criticism or anything, but it did just strike me as a little bit interesting for him to dissociate a little bit like that. Like, not in a serious way. It was just just the language of it, just like, people do sometimes with when they think of themselves as a kid or something like that. But, this idea of, instead of saying, I am proud of myself now, he wonders what the past him would think, as though it was a different person. And that's not like, I'm not making any point about that. Just I noted the use of the language there.
Yeah.
So I like Dan. That's not like a complaint or a worry sign or anything like that. I just thought it was interesting. Maybe not, though. That brings us to the immunity challenge, though. The immunity challenge was pretty standard, except for the snake mace, which was very cool. We get a shot as we're panning over and learning about the challenge. We get a shot of the hidden idol, which is, just good editing. So we know where it is when Dan wants to go look for it. That
was fun watching him, that was fun watching him do that sort of awkward, like,
We're just sort of like, everyone's really paying attention to the maze, so they won't notice if I'm tying my shoe maybe or something. Okay, got it. Stuff it in my pants.
The way that he was kind of just like leaning, and he was kind of rocking. He was like, oh, I kind of rocked too far back, so I stepped back.
Yeah.
And now I'm, oh, and man, I just sort of just kind of scratch here, and then, oh, man, I step back a little bit again.
Yeah.
And now I'm here.
Yeah. Funny how that happened.
Yeah.
Looking around. I wondered if it seemed like he was paying so much attention to his own tribe, which makes perfect sense, of course. But I wondered what it might have been interesting if someone from one of the other tribes had seen him.
Yeah, I didn't even really consider that.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't happen, so it's kind of moot, but that's one of the things I was thinking about as we watched him go for it. But good on him that he got it. So now he has two, one that a couple of people know about, and now another one that's just for him. You know, it's totally secret. It's everyone is pretty even. It seems briefly like Purple's falling behind, but then as they all get started on the maze, it was pretty even, and some back and forth and ups and downs, and well paced finish. And then we get Buku is first, and that's two in a row, two first place in a row wins for them. Followed by, sorry, I lost my place in my notes. Here we go. And then Christian does a great job catching up a lot of ground on the maze for Tiva and getting second place, which leaves Nabini in the purple buffs going to tribal council. And we go to commercial with Lyrsa talking about wanting to take out Natalie, but the problem is the plan for the Goliaths is to be Goliath strong and to vote out Lyrsa or Nick. And, thus the last of the episode kind of comes down to it. We get into the jacket issue, which part of what I thought about during that whole thing was that, there's no way I could replicate it in a way that's really useful other than to just call out a reference that people should look up, which is that the Venture Brothers, which is an excellent animated TV show that I think is in some ways less appreciated by the mainstream than it would be, except that the seasons have long gaps in between. Like it'll go 2.5 years between seasons. And so that's hard for a lot of people to maintain, but I love it. And there's a character on it who has a band called Shallow Gravy, and they produced one single for this band as part of the show and everything. And it's called Jacket. And it's a fun, silly little song, but because they said the word jacket so many times, it made me think of it. So what did you think of the whole jacket incident?
I think that Angelina started it from a selfish but not malicious place. I think she just thought it was obvious that Lyrsa was going, was cold, and wanted a jacket, and so kind of stoked up this thing of well, maybe I could get her jacket. And that sort of snowballed into this whole thing where they were bullying Nick into telling her to leave her jacket, and is it worth $1 million to say no to this? And I mean, it was just so odd where it went from Angelina probably half joking but sounded serious because she really wanted a jacket. you know, and liked Lyrsa's jacket. It was very odd.
And, and this was another example, not really like the eggs thing, but it's like a Rashomon of that argument, right? In the sense that from Nick's perspective, he feels like he's being extorted and bullied over something that's strictly speaking not really part of the game.
Right, and it was Natalie that remind me. It was Natalie that did tell him that it was like, "Are you willing to risk $1 million?"
Yeah, that was Natalie.
Right.
So Natalie really. So
like Angelina never took it to that level. Like she kind of ignited.
The way it played out is Angelina was talking to Natalie half idly about. It sounded to me like what she was saying is, we're planning to vote out Lyrsa. Do you think there's a way that we could end up keeping her jacket? Like she wouldn't bring it with her and we could keep it. And because I want it.
Right.
And so the idea was, and so like the frustration there that she's kind of talking out loud was, how do you ask for that? Like there's no nice, polite way to say, we're planning to vote you home. Can we keep your jacket? Because that's right. So she's kind of just feeling like, I want to get that jacket somehow. And it sounded like it was just kind of idle talk.
Right.
But
it was not malicious, but it was selfish in that she was really only considering what she wanted at the time.
Well, and she's thinking to herself that Lyrsa is going to be mad from getting voted out, but she won't really need the jacket after being, voted out because she'll go with all of her other stuff. Whereas I'm going to be still here. I can use the jacket. Yeah. So like it makes perfect sense. And so I think it was really only as she's talking about it and she's like enlisting Natalie, like help me figure out a way to get the jacket.
Right. And Natalie's response was, I'm going to go force Nick to do this.
Yeah, I'm going to go try to make Nick steal Lyrsa's jacket. And then when he resists that, I'm going to try to make him give us his jacket. And it was like all about like, I have set myself a task, which is to obtain a jacket, and I will do so at all costs.
Right.
And
what the rebound from that was Nick, rather than just being not happily, but
like
begrudgingly going along with voting for Lyrsa to stay alive. To, you know what?
Like,
this, like, she sucks. She's bullying me. She's trying to force me to give her a jacket. I mean, this is nonsense. Like, let's end this now. I'm willing to go down because this is crap.
Yeah.
He didn't say all those words, but like that was what
it became an issue that he could rally people behind. And Mike had already been complaining about her, and we also know that he was lingering mad because of Jeremy, because he and Jeremy were buds, and so the group voted out Jeremy in order to resolve that tension at that time, but then he continued to have problems with Natalie, and so Nick felt like, hey, maybe we can do something here. But what I was saying in terms of the Rashomon element of it is that we kind of just talked through Nick's perspective, but I really do think that this is an interesting question because you're more involved with things related to sales than I am, but and this is not to compare you to Natalie in this case, but her position when she defended herself was, we were negotiating. I was in a position of power and I was trying to get a good deal. Namely, we had a goal. It was a jacket. I was trying to get it. I was leveraging the power that we had over him.
Yeah, I mean, that's lazy, basically. Like, that's lazy sales.
Yeah, the end of the transaction would leave him feeling angry and resentful instead of happy with the arrangement.
Correct. Like, that's not how negotiations are meant to work,
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
they're not zero-sum games. Like, there's not one winner and one loser. Like that.
Right.
That's not how they're supposed to work. Like,
this is not them haggling over a price. This is give us the money or we beat you up.
Right.
Or vote you out. And especially since we know that the actual target was Lyrsa, it was a little bit disingenuous too. Now, I mean, I don't fault that for, I mean, like the idea of lying to someone in this game. I mean, have discussed that a lot. I don't really think that's a problem, but it's weird in this context because they're tying something superficial, but I guess it's not entirely superficial because it really affects your comfort in the game, but something normally not considered to be part of the game.
Right.
Tying that to
it's sort of an externality that came in, though. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a normal consideration.
Right.
Yeah, but to your point, I mean, like, that's not negotiating. Like, a good sort of a simplistic way that I've always like kind of been taught to look at it is like a good negotiation ends with either compromise or consensus.
Mm-hmm.
So either both parties, like, or all parties, or however many are in there, give up something to compromise and agree that this advances all of us forward.
Mm-hmm.
Or you get creative and find a way where everybody agrees, like, here's how we are going to decide to go because we all agree that this is great for everybody. Like, so it's not like everybody always, like, it's not, but see, so this is sort of the opposite of that. Like, I see it as like a negotiation is either each party eventually gives up something because to advance the greater goal of whatever the negotiation is, mm-hmm. or each party finds a way where ultimately, like, you get more than you intended by mm-hmm. working together. Which this was more like, no, one party has to give up more than the other party if they have the power. Like, that's not. Right. Yes, there are power dynamics and all of that type of stuff, and yes, the compromise can be unbalanced sometimes. Like, that's not what I'm not mm-hmm. trying to overly simplify it.
Right. I mean, yeah, it did really kind of resemble extortion because we know that Nick hadn't been the target. And so to suggest that he was and say that the way to save him is to give up the jacket. And also in this context of him sticking around and now not having a jacket that someone else will wear, like that's weird. That's a weird deal. And I think that Natalie was bored. And
right, and that's where I was going to kind of finish with this, is that, like, what tends to happen, and I guess not all the time, I mean, compromise happens a lot more than, but when there are power dynamics, compromise mm-hmm. is one of the more likely situations. But it is not leveraging power over one or the other. It's agreeing what does everybody want to move forward, and what does it take from each side to get that to happen.
Right.
Whereas consensus more happens when you're in equal playing fields. I mean, I just had a long call today with a partner where we were negotiating, but neither of us had a position of power over each other. So we reached a consensus of, like, here are the things that I'm going to bring to the table for this partnership, and he said, here are the things I'm going to bring to the table, and we leave and we're like, we are in consensus that we are now both going to advance both of our agendas in a much more positive way than before our discussion, because but it's like a net positive, not a net negative, and that's like, I guess you see the world more optimistically. Maybe mm-hmm. that's why I think like this, but definitely not that. You give me this, or I walk away and don't give right. you that. And I feel like that's what Natalie's used to in her negotiating, is that, and mm-hmm. there are some businesses like that where they have this incredible leverage over others that it's like, hey, I need you to give me X.
Yeah.
And they say, well, I would like Y. And they said, no, you give me X, or I go to someone else and get X. And they said,
yeah. Oh. What that actually just makes me think of is perhaps a perhaps interesting point about the difference between real life business negotiations and the game of Survivor, which is to say, the reason that being, the hard sell and being willing to walk away works in the real world is that if, let's say, you're hiring a contractor for something, to do some housework, and you feel like, sorry, that price is too high. I'm not willing to pay that much. And they say, well, that's the price. And then you say, okay, then never mind, you're not hired. And you can walk away and hire another contractor.
Right. That's not a negotiation.
Yeah. But my point is that my illustration is to justify.
Yes.
Then you can go then hire somebody else. But in Survivor, there's no other deal to be made. There's not any alternative.
And that's why, and your point is exactly why I kind of highlighted how I view negotiation of like, it's either a compromise or a consensus. Like it's more of this, all these net positives, because what the situation you're talking about, I don't consider that a negotiation. You are not negotiating with the contractor. You are issuing a demand and you are then going and shopping around essentially. Like that's not the same thing to me. And I feel like that term is misappropriated a lot. Like you sort of unlocked this. I was kind of trying to stay away from it, but because a lot of people term that negotiating. Like, oh, we negotiated this down. No, you didn't. You just leveraged it down. Like you either got that or you went to somebody else. Like you bid it. That's a bid. That's not a negotiation. And just because it was softer than like an actual bid doesn't make it not a bid. You're bidding.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, if you contractor will not give me this for X price, then I will go to another contractor. That's a bid. It's not a negotiation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just in terms of the semantics of it, because when you do actually have the choice of many different options and it is completely up to you to just choose the one that has the price you want, then there's really no skill of negotiation there. There's just picking the cheapest one or the best one, the best value for whatever criteria you're using.
Right, because that's another thing. We do that in our business too. Like there are bids that we put out and where I guess where the mistake comes in the negotiation is that, they may have said this was the price and you said, I want it for this. And they came back at somewhere in between. No, that's a counter offer. That's not a negotiation. Like that's a counter to your bid offer. Like that, those are different things to me, at least. So I just feel like that. So, and that's why so.
Yeah, no, I guess what I was trying to get at was not so much defending her position so much as I believe that she believes it. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Like I think that she approached that like she approaches business dealings. Perhaps, I don't know, but
no, I think you're 100% right,
yeah.
And I think you're right that she believes that, and that's why I think what gets me like so fired up about that is because there are lots of business people who I feel like think like that, and it's different than how I think. Like I have a disagreement that that's a negotiation.
Yeah,
but I do believe that is a real thing that people think that is a negotiation and that is how you operate. Yeah. And I think she 100% believed that she was doing that.
Yeah, so, she is in a position of power and she is leveraging that power in an attempt to get what she wants.
Correct.
Yeah. And so I can see from her perspective, this is just business, whereas it feels personal to Nick because he's the one being leveraged against with really no upside.
Correct.
Yeah. In any event, that proves an issue that Nick is able, with his rock star alliance with Mike, and the idea is to bring over Angelina. One of the interesting bits in hindsight here is that we saw what happened in the tribal council here, but apparently Angelina has said on Twitter since the episode that she also was on board with the plan to vote out Natalie, but because she knew her vote wasn't actually necessary, it was absolutely an attempt to say, Natalie, I didn't vote for you. Can you give me your jacket, please? And so given that that is what it was, and that Natalie may well have seen through it exactly and says she did, that puts a little bit of a different spin on her refusal to give up the jacket at the end, but it also puts the lie to any suggestion that Natalie's motives were pure in this whole endeavor.
Correct. Without even hearing that interview, I suspected that was sort of like, because they approach, like Angelina knew they were going to do it. Like it almost seemed irresponsible to vote the other way unless she was already sure of what things were going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's kind of what I figured. And even the way that she like said it to Natalie, like that's one of those ones where, you know, I could believe that Natalie could see through that one. You know, I think the earlier one that you talked about where she said like, oh, he tried to hurt me on purpose. I could see or hear it in his voice. Like that one's a little,
well, and
the thing with her is like, there's a lot of intelligence and there's a lot of things that she understands. And I think that's where you hit on it was like, it's just that she probably has been surrounded by people who have kind of accepted who she is and like work in that universe where that's just the normal.
She's a powerful personality.
Yes.
And that can be a very good mixture in the right context. But in other contexts, it's like, I'm just thinking of like cooking or something, it's like a very powerfully flavored ingredient is going to be great in some recipes and terrible in others.
Cumin.
Yeah, there you go.
Put cumin in the wrong thing and you will be unhappy.
Indeed. Yeah, so I think that in one of the other things that she mentioned is that collision that she mentioned when she fell, she did kind of tweak her back a little bit and said that it basically was hurting the whole time she was out there, which is a bummer, like that's that anyone's hurting, and you can imagine why that might have contributed perhaps to her not moving around very much and being a little bit grumpy.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, and I ended up more sympathetic to her than I was originally.
Yeah.
I don't think she did things right, and I don't think she played well to win this game. And I'm not sad to see her like out of the equation because of some of the she was rubbing the other players wrong. But I feel like I get it more. Like where she's coming, like she's not a bad person. Like she clearly is. You can see why she's been successful. Like it's not an accident.
Yeah.
It's put her into a different universe that she was just unable, which is again part of what the whole excitement about Survivor and the social dynamics. Like she was not able to put herself in this social situation, and bond with people and be successful. Like this was different than what she's used to.
Yeah, we saw a couple of times where she seemed to want to just declare that she had a good relationship with people, absent anything that we saw, and usually in the face of she's literally contradicting someone that says they have a problem with her.
Right.
It's like, no, you don't. I mean, that's not exactly what happened, but it came across that way a couple of times.
It definitely did.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm glad that she stayed on enough for more insight into her. For us to get more insight into her and to be able to understand and be sympathetic. Right. Even if we ultimately agreed this was probably the right decision,
Well, it's interesting because it depends on what you're going for. Like on a personal level, I felt like she might be a great person in some circumstances, but on this show, the tension she created was an uncomfortable chemistry for me, and I didn't enjoy that part of it. It wasn't good TV for me because it just felt uncomfortable. Now, I mean, that doesn't make her a bad person. It just wasn't fun to watch for me on TV. And so on that level, I'm happy that she was voted off. From a strictly strategic level, I find myself inherently rooting for the Davids a little bit, but nonetheless, when Angelina was laying it out as saying, if we lose another Goliath, the Goliath numbers advantage is gone. It's 7-7. And I was just thinking, how could you give that up? That seems terrible. I mean, Natalie's maybe not fun at camp, but are you willing to be the ones that are responsible now? I mean, you know that one Goliath has been gone already. And so, like, we talked about, like, you know, the gerrymandering of the Goliath sure has not been effective in this particular season.
Yeah, I mean, except like that, some of that's sort of academic. Like, yes, you could go back to the Goliaths and have this majority and do all, but eventually people have to turn on people. Like, just because like you, like being voted out fifth to last versus last is like that. There's no difference. So the way I looked at it is, and that's why I said like the whole jacket thing was like key for me, is because, you know, and that's why I use the term, like, she introduced this externality into the situation. That's what she does, and that's what you don't want. It is worth giving up that because of like what she brings in, things that alter your calculus. You don't want that. You want to be operating everybody on the same playing field. Everybody, you know, if you're trying to think ahead and trying to do all these and maneuver, you want to know where all the chips and chips lay. And so it's not really that she's erratic. Like, that's why I describe it that way. Like,
yeah, I mean, she was on board with the alliance.
Yeah, but it works in the same way as someone who's erratic. Like, you want that out of the equation. Like, you don't want.
She almost becomes a reason for people not to work with you. Like, if she's with you,
there's this unexpected thing that could start happening that starts to change, you know, because that's what happened here. Like, Nick was happy to go along with this. Then Natalie entered with this jacket thing, and it fired Nick up, which changed the equation.
Yeah.
And that's what you don't want later, when you think you've got everything planned and then something pops up and she pops off at somebody or does something that, and all of a sudden they, instead of going along with what makes sense in all these strategy plans, they start changing it. And not what's good for the game, it's because she introduced something that did that. You want that out of the equation.
You know, it's interesting because I think you're onto something, but I would put a slightly different spin on it. Okay. I would think, rather than it being smart to get rid of her in order to prevent that outcome, I would say that's what happened here. Is they behaved irrationally because of their emotional response to her. They were so emotionally frustrated with her that they were willing to sacrifice a strategic advantage in a game where the strategy matters. Because obviously they didn't have control over Natalia getting voted out last time. It's also just a weird coincidence that last time was Natalia and this time was Natalie. Just, I mean, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a coincidence. But you know, they didn't have any control over that. But now, from a standpoint, like, if the Goliath strong had held in both of those accounts, we would be in a situation of 9 Goliath to 5 Davids instead of 7 to 7. And so just this time, it could have been 8 to 6 instead of 7 to 7.
It's still an artifice. Like, it doesn't matter. You know, because you started together, like, you're inherently, like, I think that they're smarter. Like, a lot of them are smarter than that, and they're able to step back from that and say, yeah, like, that's important, but ultimately we're going to all need to work with these people. It's who can be better. You know, this is sort of leveled the playing field, and who can be better at working with those other 7. You know,
but it can't matter now. It's an option off the table.
Right, and I think that makes I think that makes more sense. Like, going back again to, like, now you're going to have to actually enter into true negotiations with, like, and now whoever's the most skilled at creating the advantage is going to be there. I know that's not the point of this show. It was supposed to be the Goliaths, like, just overpowering them.
Well, no, I'm just saying that numbers do matter in this game. And we have seen super alliances be very effective in other seasons, where you have like a big chunk of people that manage to eliminate everyone outside of that group before they start turning on themselves, because there's an expectation. Yes, the 7 of us will stay strong until it's just us 7, and then we all understand that it's anything goes after that. And so obviously you're not wrong that there's always, like, even if you have the numbers, it could always turn on you. But if you don't have the numbers, that's a tool out of your toolbox.
Yeah, I agree that in normal situations you don't want to dwindle the numbers. I don't think it's such a severe disadvantage, is my point, for the other things that were brought into this. And I think that both Natalie and Natalia both brought these things to the table, and that's why. And I said I chose that term on purpose, like the externalities, because like that's an economics thing. Like externalities are bad for the system. Like they mess up efficient systems because they are unaccounted for, they're unplanned for, they're a problem. I mean, this is going to sound like a bizarre thing, but it's something I read one time. It's why I don't recline my airline seat. Yes, I know my airline seat is built to recline. I know you could just make that, but it just puts externalities into the system that just aren't like it just aren't necessary.
Yeah. I will say in agreement with you. I'll say this to anyone out there: if you recline your airline seat, you're a bad person.
Yes, and I know they are designed to recline, and you have the right to recline it. Yeah, I don't agree with doing it.
I'll backpedal that just a little bit to say it's not necessarily that you are a bad person. You're doing something that a bad person does. So if you don't want to be a bad person, stop it.
Yep, fair.
The comfort you gain is not worth the discomfort you cause the person behind you.
Right, and the point of like what an externality does is that it puts a decision-making then standpoint into the person behind you. Do they then recline a little bit, which then waterfalls into the person behind them, and then all of these things that happen simply because you reclined your seat. That's what an externality is. That's what Natalie's putting in the system. Is like there's this whole waterfall of stuff that you didn't think you were going to have to deal with. Like when you got on that airplane, you didn't think you'd have to worry about which person might recline their seat, which could cause all of this effect. That's what he's doing, and that's why it's a problem. Like that's how I'm thinking of it. You know?
Oh, sure, yeah. I'm a little bit amused at how many little side tangent topics there have been in this episode. I mean, they're all brought about, but I just we came to them organically, I guess is my point. But yeah. So I think.
Well, I'm ready to wrap up now.
What?
I said I'm ready to wrap up now. I'm good.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess just to come back around to it, I believe that by giving up the numbers, that was a substantial advantage sacrificed. Whether that was worth it or not remains to be seen. Obviously, they felt it was. They felt that whatever Natalie would have brought to the table had she continued, had they voted out Lyrsa instead, would not have been would have been enough of a problem that it would have counteracted the numbers advantage, and more so. Either that, or as I suspect, it was less about a strategic plan for the future and more about, I cannot take this anymore. I can't concentrate. I need her to be gone so that I can focus.
Right.
Which is, whether that's rational or irrational is a little bit, it's kind of like it's a rational assessment of an irrational reaction, I guess.
Right.
The idea, yeah.
And that's kind of where I settle, is that one way or the other, I think it is better strategically, but I'm not saying that they went into it. I'm not saying they went into it with the plan that I'm sort of armchair.
Well, I'm rooting for the I'm rooting for the Davids anyway. So it just as a group, to the extent that matters anymore at this point, because
Christian.
Yeah, there you go. That's one of each.
Dan, I would settle for Dan. All brochachos. Yeah.
If this was an anime, the finale would be John and Christian forced, despite all of their love and friendship for one another, forced nonetheless to fight one another. It'd be a big tragic anime ending, I think. It would be the twist, the subversion on David and Goliath. That what if David and Goliath were forced to fight by their respective sides, but they actually really liked each other? They were actually brochachos all along. Anyway.
That made me think, not that Jeff would ever allow this, but like I could see the point with the brochachos if they got to that John and Christian like they're just like kind of like silly enough in like what I've seen that they would come to it and be like, Jeff, we've decided that we don't need to hold the final tribal council. We will split the $1 million between us. And I could see Christian like delivering that deadpan. Can't you?
Yeah, no, I'm just imagining, because I've got to think.
I mean, he would seriously tell Jeff, "We've decided it's a tie."
Yeah. See, I'm torn, because on the one hand, I feel like there's no way the producers would let that happen because it breaks the show. But it would be so cool.
It would be so cool. And especially, it would be, what would make it even cooler is if they both held to it after Jeff says, "Sorry, that's not the way the show works. We're still going to have final tribal council." And they'll be like, "Well, we refuse to participate."
Yeah. We declare ourselves to be co-mayors of Survivor Town.
We take the 5th on each other.
What does that mean?
Anything that would implicate my opponent.
We actually got married back at camp before we came to Tribal Council. You can force us to testify against each other.
All right, I guess I'm going to turn the whole LA.
That's not the 5th though, but anyway.
Anyway.
All right. Anyway, but yes, I am very certain that somewhere on the internet, there are people writing John and Christian fanfic, as they should. So next time, I guess next time, battle lines blur, enemies become friends, friends become enemies, and yeah. We'll see. Now, the other piece that we have to just briefly mention, as mentioned last week, is that because this weekend I am flying to South Korea and will be there for the next little while, we don't know yet what schedule might work for this. So we'll have to figure that out, and we don't know the answer yet. I think Mike and I would both like to continue the show if we can make the schedule work, but we don't know what timing that will involve yet. So watch this space, I guess. Yeah. I'll tweet about it once we come to some solution. But just as a forewarning, if there's not an episode next week, that's probably why.
Yep.
All right. So in the meantime, though,
maybe sort of our giddiness tonight too, knowing this is the last.
Yeah.
Hoping it's not the last one, but
oh well. It's certainly not the last one forever.
But for this season, I mean, or
we'll have to figure it out. But yeah, so but yeah, not the last one forever, but maybe for a little while,
potentially.
So, yeah. So in any event, thank you for listening and or watching, and we might be back next week for some more Survivor. But in the meantime, good night, everybody.
Good night.